ख़वातीन हज़रात, आज़ाद लबों के साथ फराज दरवेश आपकी खिदमत में हाजिर हैं। साथ में मिसबा आज़म और साथ में हमारे डॉक्टर उवैस सलीम। आप प्रोफेसर हैं, सहाफ़ी रहे हैं, पाकिस्तान अमेरिका की पॉलिसीज़ पे गहरी नज़र रखते हैं। मैं स्टार्ट जो है डॉक्टर उवैस आपसे ही करता हूँ। ये अमेरिका के अंदर बहुत बड़ी हिस्टोरिक डेवलपमेंट हो गई कि बाइडेन साहब आ गए, उन्होंने ओथ भी ले लिया। अच्छा, मज़े की बात ये है कि हमारे कुछ दोस्तों ने पाकिस्तान में शर्तें लगाई हुई थी और सट्टा खेला हुआ था कि बाइडेन जो है पीसफुली जो है इसकी इनॉग्रेशन नहीं होगी और वहां पर थोड़ा फुड़ी होगी, हंगामाराई होगी और उसके बाद जो है ना मामला बड़े खराब होंगे और हो सकता है वो ऑफिस में जा ही ना सके। अब ये सट्टेबाजी मेरे ख्याल से शायद हम खेलते हैं इस उम्मीद के साथ कि शायद जिस तरह के हमारे मामलात हैं इसी तरह के शायद मामलात वहां भी चल रहे हैं और इस तरह के मामलात हमें कुछ होते हुए नजर आए, कुछ नजारे हमें देखने को मिले। लेकिन जो है मामला सही हो गया, बाइडेन साहब आ गए ऑफिस में और अब लेकिन जो चीजें वो साइन कर रहे हैं आहिस्ता-आहिस्ता, तो लग रहा है कि पॉलिसीज़ को अगर अभी हम 1 हफ्ता देखें, तो 1 हफ्ते में उन्होंने चंद ऐसे जो इक़दामात उठाए, उससे लग रहा है कि जो डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प साहब की जो बहुत सारी जो पॉलिसीज़ थी, जिसमें जो क्लाइमेट चेंज का पेरिस अकॉर्ड से वो निकल गए थे, जिसका दुनिया को नुकसान हुआ, सिर्फ अमेरिका को नहीं, वो उसमें वापस जा रहा है अमेरिका। तो बहुत सारी चीजें अब अनडू होना शुरू हो गई हैं। तो सर, ये पाकिस्तान के मामलात भी कुछ हमारे अनडू होंगे कि नहीं होंगे?
बहुत शुक्रिया फराज। ये तमाम लोग जो इस
अच्छा, मेरी मेरी आवाज साफ आ रही है आप लोगों को? क्योंकि
मुझे बिल्कुल ठीक है।
अच्छा, बिल्कुल ठीक आ रही है। ओके, चलें जी, बहुत शुक्रिया।
ये तमाम लोग जो इस उम्मीद पर बैठे थे या बैठे हैं कि अमेरिका की तबाही का आगाज हो गया, जाहिर है उसकी बुनियाद वो रवैया था जो डोनाल्ड ट्रंप और उनके हामियों ने इलेक्शन के दौरान और इलेक्शन के बाद दिखाया, जिसकी कल्मिनेशन हमने देखी जो कैपिटल पर हमला हुआ। कौन सोच सकता था कि ऐसा होगा अमेरिका के अंदर, और कौन सोच सकता था कि इनॉग्रेशन डे पर 25,000 फौजी जो हैं वो वाशिंगटन डीसी के अंदर तैनात होंगे। तो बहरहाल उसकी एक सॉलिड बैकग्राउंड थी, एक बेसिस थी। लेकिन हमने साथ ये भी देखा कि ऐसे मौके पर जब जो वीक स्टेट्स होती हैं वो ग्राउंड यील्ड करती हैं, वो निगोशिएशन की तरफ जाती हैं, वो अपना कमजोर पना जो है उसकी बुनियाद पर नुकसान उठाती हैं, और जो स्ट्रॉन्ग स्टेट है वो अपने आप को असर्ट करती है। और हमने देखा कि स्टेट ने असर्ट किया। हमने ये देखा कि उन तमाम लोगों की गिरफ्तारियां हुई। हमने ये देखा कि उन लोगों के खिलाफ जो है क्रिमिनल प्रोसीडिंग्स की जा रही हैं। हमने ये देखा कि डोनाल्ड ट्रंप को चाहे रिलक्टेंटली ही सही, लेकिन उस वायलेंस को डिसओन करना पड़ा, रिपब्लिकन पार्टी को उसको डिसओन करना पड़ा। और हमने सबसे बड़ा मुजाहरा उसका देखा सदर बाइडेन की इनॉग्रेशन स्पीच में, जब उन्होंने वाज़े तौर पर व्हाइट सुप्रीमेसी का जिक्र किया अपनी तकरीर में, इन्होंने डोमेस्टिक टेररिज्म का जिक्र किया और उन्होंने ये कहा कि हम इसको सख्ती से निपटेंगे। और जिन इकदामात का चंद रोज में आपने इशारा दिया, वो भी इसी बात की तरफ इशारा कर रहे हैं कि सदर बाइडेन ने अपने इब्तदाई चंद दिनों में इलेक्शन से पहले जो वादे किए थे कैंपेन ट्रेल के दौरान, वो ना सिर्फ उस पर अमल करने का इरादा रखते हैं, बल्कि वो यही चाहते हैं कि उनकी लेगेसी जो है वो डोनाल्ड ट्रंप से बिल्कुल मुख्तलिफ हो और अमेरिका जो है वो एक रीसेट मोड की तरफ जाए।
Faraz, you are mute.
I am so sorry. So audience will, what we will do, we'll switch over to English for a while, and we have a special guest with us. So we'll switch over to English, and then we will switch back over to Urdu in the later part of the show. So we have a special guest, Michael Kugelman. Michael is a deputy director and Asia programs at Wilson Center in Washington, D.C., and has a very focused eye on Pakistan and the region. Afghanistan, Pakistan. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. And I was just finishing off your article. Very interestingly, you mentioned that not much is going to change in terms of the region, Pakistan and Afghanistan, but you do mention that President Biden will take a different approach that may upset the negotiation that has happened between U.S. administration and Taliban. So tell us, where do you think the policy or the relations will go for the region?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Now, I think that it's interesting in that we're going to see an incredibly different foreign policy, for the most part, from Biden compared to Trump. But indeed, I do think that we are going to see a fair amount of policy continuity between Trump and Biden in the South Asia context. So there will be some differences. I mean, basically what I mean here is that if you look at India, India will continue to be the priority relationship in South Asia for the Biden administration. That's quite clear. You've got a group of folks in the administration that are longtime friends of India, including Biden himself, who helped negotiate the civil nuclear deal with India. So that'll be a continuity. With Pakistan, it's a bit more complicated, but I think that this administration, like the previous one, will look at Pakistan as a country that basically, you have to get along with it. There's not going to be a desire to expand it in a big way, unlike what Islamabad would like to see. But just as what we saw with the Trump administration, the Biden administration will want to work with Pakistan in the context of some very narrowly focused areas of cooperation, like Afghanistan and also counterterrorism. But beyond that, it's sort of unclear. And that's, again, much like what you had with the Trump administration. With Afghanistan, Biden, like Trump, he's not comfortable staying in Afghanistan. He wants to get out. He was really the lone holdout of Barack Obama's troop surge. Biden has never been comfortable with keeping large numbers of forces in Afghanistan for a long time. This is very much like Trump. But indeed, I think with Afghanistan, what could be a bit different is the pacing and the sequencing of the withdrawal. I think that what we could see, at least initially, is the Biden administration wanting to try to impose more conditions on the withdrawal of the remaining U.S. forces in Afghanistan, which are only 2,500. There may be more of an effort to try to basically pressure the Taliban and say, well, until there's clear indications that you're reducing violence, we're not going to remove the rest of our troops. But once you get to late April or early May, when, according to the U.S. Taliban deal, all U.S. troops are supposed to leave, that's where things get a bit tricky. But I think bottom line, and I'll end here, what's been most striking to me so far about the Biden administration and its policies in South Asia is that it's been very transparent in the fact that it needs a lot of work to do. It needs to get up to speed. It's acknowledged that there's a lot that it needs to figure out about Afghanistan, what type of commitments the Taliban made in its deal with the U.S., what different elements of the U.S. troop posture. So I don't think we're going to see any major decisions on policy in South Asia from the Biden administration.
But Michael, the problem may become once the withdrawal, the policy or the plan for the withdrawal changes, and if Taliban do not like what Biden new plan is, there may be a surge in the attacks, which could lead to a chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the problem. The Taliban has taken a very hard line throughout this reconciliation process because, unfortunately, it has the luxury of doing that because it holds the upper hand. The Taliban will say to the Americans, if the Americans do not withdraw the rest of their forces by the end of April or early May, the Taliban will probably threaten to renege on that whole agreement and go back to fighting U.S. forces and so on. And that puts the Biden administration in a tough spot, to put it mildly. I think that what's going to come down to for the Biden administration is to eventually plan for the withdrawal of those remaining forces, and then figure out if they need to figure out how to maintain a counterterrorism capacity, and if so, how would they maintain that counterterrorism capacity with no more troops on the ground?
See, there is an element within Taliban that is not happy with the peace process, right? There is an element that has been putting pressure on Taliban itself, right? So the problem will be that that element, that the extremist element, may get empowered within Taliban, and this could have a chaotic situation in Pakistan as well, because Pakistan always becomes a victim because there is a surge in the attacks, then the blame game begins in Afghanistan, and then the relation between Afghanistan and Pakistan gets jeopardized, and then indeed the attacks later.
Well, I mean, clearly the Taliban is talking and fighting at the same time. We've heard that so much, it's become cliche. I mean, there clearly is buy-in from the Taliban at the highest levels for negotiations, just because you have the most senior Taliban leaders, or many of them, have been present and participating in the negotiations. But indeed, there's a disconnect, a very tragic one, between these top leaders in Doha, meeting with foreign dignitaries and talking about their desire for peace, and then back home in Afghanistan, the Taliban is going crazy with carrying out attacks, intensifying violence, going after civil society. And commanders in the field have basically stated, including to Western media outlets, that they are not going to stop fighting. So, as an analyst, I'm very skeptical about this idea that there could ever be a successful peace process. And indeed, no matter how, if you have a situation where the peace talks don't go well, a lot of people are going to be affected in a bad way, especially the Afghans. But then you have to look at Afghanistan's neighbors like Pakistan. They certainly will be impacted as well.
Right. So let me take it over to both Dr. Uwais Salim and Dr. Misbah Azam. We know the situation. There are few things that Pakistan could control, and there are few things that Pakistan can't control. Right now, with Taliban, it's pretty obvious that Pakistan does not have a full command or full control over the Taliban. If Taliban decide to start the attack, there is nothing Pakistan could do. Should Pakistan recalibrate any policy with the Biden administration, depending on what the new withdrawal plan looks like?
What are you asking?
Dr. Uwais Salim.
Okay. Well, you see, if you take the 8 years of the Obama administration and the 4 years of Trump administration, the relationship has ebbed and flowed. And the primary constant throughout this tenure has been a trust deficit on both sides that has never gone away. But since Afghanistan is the focus of attention, so Trump, after initially kind of taking pot shots at Pakistan's role, tried to warm up to the Pakistani administration. But like Michael was saying, there was a kind of urgency in their plans. They were trying to go the extra mile. They were trying to accept all the conditionalities that Taliban were laying out. And if you get a sense from Islamabad, even Islamabad was not very comfortable with that. And Shah Mahmood Qureshi a couple of times kind of alluded to that as well. So I think that a sort of reset in that peace process where conditionalities are being renegotiated in a way, and maybe not as much focus on the entire process, that will work to the Biden administration's advantage, as well as Islamabad's advantage as well. When both countries move beyond Afghanistan, I am not too sure that there are too many tangibles that they can work with in the short term or maybe in the long term.
Right. Dr. Misbah, let me take it over to you. Now, the good part is President Biden understands the region very well. He's been involved. He's been in the politics. His approach will be more traditional approach. What do you have to say to this? Is there anything Pakistan needs to do or to recalibrate?
Well, first of all, I would like to apologize to Michael because we had to have him wait there for some time. Yeah, and good to see him joining us. Faraz, look, I mean, it's true that President Biden knows very well not only about Pakistan but all this region, as Michael indicated and Dr. Salim also indicated, that what kind of contributions he had in the region, like a nuclear deal with India and all that. So that is both good and bad for Pakistan. I mean, the thing is that good in a sense that Pakistan, let me rephrase. That is good for the people of Pakistan, but may not be as good as the quote unquote the hybrid government of Pakistan. You know, President Biden knows very well his effort in Pakistan was always helping to provide the people of Pakistan that democracy dividends. Right. So of course, and my understanding, and Faraz, if you allow me, I have some question to Michael also.
Yes, absolutely. Now, also, I would like to know, does that mean that more empowerment to PDM?
I don't think that he would go into that much of intricate details of Pakistani political dynamics. I don't think he would go there. But the thing is that if you see it, all the Kerry Lugar bill and all those kind of things, you know, that was more for the people of Pakistan. I mean, of course, he supports the political government in Pakistan, but in what way he does it, we have yet to see that. But okay. I really doubt that he would go there and start giving statements in favor of the opposition.
Let me take it to Dr. Awais Salim has a question. Dr. Awais.
I just wanted to plug in a quick point to what Dr. Misbah was saying. Joe Biden wrote an article in Foreign Affairs a couple of months ago in which he laid out his foreign policy agenda. And one core point in there was that he would like to make his concern very public about those countries where democracy is under threat or some sort of authoritarianism is being implemented. So what if U.S. government offers something to Pakistan and wants something in return? Will the Pakistan hybrid regime be willing to kind of open up and loosen the curbs on the freedom of expression, be more democratic towards the opposition party and voices of dissent? That is the real question here.
Right. Let's switch over to Michael. Michael, you've heard.
Faraz, may I interject here? I have one question to Michael, if you kindly allow me to ask before I forget. Michael, I was watching your interview with Dr. Mueed Yusuf, which you did it on probably 21st of January. You asked one very interesting question there. Although Mueed responded it to you, and of course I heard him, what he said, but I really like to have your input in that. How you see it. Your question was that knowing that Pakistan's relationship with China, is Pakistan willing or able to help US-China come close to each other?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think that Mueed gave the answer that one would expect, in which he said, "Oh yes,
of course,
do whatever." Yeah. But no, I think that if you look at climate change, that could be a potential area there, because I think that the Biden administration has made very clear that it will continue to see China as a strategic threat, and I think that what it's done just in the first few days of its administration suggests it's going to take a tough line. But climate change has been the area that has long been viewed to be, where there could be some convergence between the U.S. and China, and where the Biden administration will want to engage on China. And certainly John Kerry, who's going to essentially be the climate change czar in this administration, he wants climate change to be the big issue in the U.S.-China relationship. And even if that means, in his view, stepping away from the geopolitical competition, he wants to focus on that. And that's where Pakistan comes into the picture. I don't know, you could argue perhaps that, Pakistan could be a useful mediator to try to encourage the two sides to come together to discuss climate issues, and particularly how Beijing could reduce its climate, its emissions. But of course, the flip side of that is, well, do you really need Pakistan in that regard? I mean, the U.S. has no issue. I mean, it has diplomatic relations with China. It's a very complicated, fraught relationship. But they talk when they have to. You look at trade, for example. There was a trade deal that came out during the Trump era between the U.S. and China, even with all the hostility. So I think that Pakistan conceivably, potentially, could be useful, just as that actor that has the good relations or the workable relations with the U.S. with the excellent relations with China could be helpful. But I think the U.S. may not need its help as much. I think Iran may be a better case. Iran, of course, is a much more hostile relationship between the U.S. and Iran, just in the sense that they don't have a formal relationship. That is where Pakistan perhaps could be useful. And I know that Pakistani governments, not just the current one, but they like to try to put themselves out there as mediators for some of these Mideast disputes, especially so that they could not get brought into the fray. So to answer your question, maybe there could be some convergence on the China issue with Pakistan being a mediator, but I see Iran perhaps as a more potential space for that.
Yeah, and that was my next question, Michael, about Iran deal. So now the Iran deal, we know what happened to Iran deal. Will it revive? Now this is on the pretty open. President Biden has been pretty open before the in his election campaign that he would try to revive that deal. Now I'm not sure whether Iran will be able to cooperate. Where do we stand with this Saudi hostility? It's more of a. So now the question becomes, will Iran deal revive, and will Saudi deal that the deal plus the relation that U.S. had with Jared Kushner had with Saudi, will that remain?
Yeah, I think that we're going to see this administration try to return to the status quo ante that you had at the end of the Obama administration, where you had these small efforts to improve the relationship with Iran, even at the cost of worse relations with Saudi Arabia. And I think that is the goal of the Biden administration, is to try to improve the relationship with Iran, mainly through getting back into that nuclear deal. But it's not going to be easy. And I think many observers have just seen it as an article of faith that, well, yes, the Biden administration is going to get back into the deal with Iran. It's going to take time. The messaging from Tehran suggests that it's not going to be as easy as some in Washington may want it to be. And let's be quite clear, during its last few weeks in power, the Trump administration really complicated U.S. relations with Iran, and with China for that matter too, by engaging in a number of measures that could cause that have caused more problems for a relationship that was already very tense. And the big question, and I don't think there's an answer for this yet, will Iran's government be willing to recognize and acknowledge and accept the Biden administration as a government that is completely different from the Trump administration and should not at all be associated with all of the things that the Trump administration did to cause the hostility in that relationship with Iran? It's very telling that in his Senate confirmation hearings, Antony Blinken, who will probably be the next Secretary of State, he essentially said that he wasn't crying over the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, and that was not going to be taken well by Iran, to be sure. So I think that there will be an effort on the part of the Biden administration to improve the relationship a bit, but it's not going to be as easy as some may think it'll be.
Yeah, and there is always a follower whenever the relation has been under jeopardy, but Saudi Iran has a follower on Pakistan. Now, Pakistani establishment is more close to Saudi. It's a pretty open secret. They're not as close to Iran. Democratic government, they have tried to act as a mediator, but I'm not sure where does the establishment stand. So I don't know whether Pakistan even has a leverage over Iran.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have nearly, well, one doesn't know if it would have leverage over China either, given that I think that's sort of an unequal relationship, weighted more in China's favor. But you're right, though I have noted, again, as just an observer of Pakistan's foreign policy, that in the Imran Khan era, there have seemed to be some efforts to try to balance a bit more toward Iran. And I think one main reason for that was what appeared to be Pakistan's unhappiness about Saudi Arabia's position on the Kashmir dispute. And I think everything sort of spiraled from there. But yes, you're right. At the end of the day, Pakistan's relationship with Iran is not the type of relationship where you could expect Islamabad to level with Tehran and say, well, look, you really should try to work with the United States more. It sort of assumes that Pakistan would want to help the United States. It also assumes Pakistan would have that type of leverage over Iran, and the jury is out on such considerations.
Right. Now, Dr. West, let me take it over to you. Now, the other piece becomes Kashmir, which everybody worries about, and this is what I'm seeing in the comment. What will happen on Kashmir now? I think I don't think that much will happen, but the question is open, and I'll want to hear from you.
Yeah, I don't think that there will be any change other than going back to the status quo position and issuing the customary statement every now and then, like it used to be in the US administration's case prior to Donald Trump, because they can't, they on one hand, they are wary of China's growing influence in the region. And they also are eyeing India as a market for the U.S. goods. It is one of the largest trade partners for United States, and it is going to remain so in the region. So they wouldn't want to offend India in any manner. So maybe like I said, other than some random statements here and there on human rights abuses and so on and so forth, I don't see any change in the policy as such.
Right. And I think, Michael, you have written that pretty much similar in your article as well, your recent article. There will probably be a human rights violation pressure on India. But other than this, India is still a bigger business partner to US. The relation, I'm not expecting any radical change. Is there anything you think Pakistan needs to probably diplomatically do to highlight the case of Kashmir to Biden administration? Now, Biden on his website, on their website, they highlighted that Kashmir there are human rights violation in Kashmir, and is a point of conflict, serious point of conflict. Now, I don't know how much will that materialize.
Yeah, well, I agree with my friend Dr. Salim's comments that we shouldn't expect much. One shouldn't expect much from the Biden administration in this regard. Certainly, this administration has said it's going to make democracy and human rights, the promotion of democracy and human rights abroad, it's going to make that a key pillar of its foreign policy. But several issues that could mitigate against that. One is that, as much as it talks about that, this administration is going to be like others. It's going to be selective in what countries it calls out for its human rights practices. It's going to target its rivals, countries that it does not have strategic partnerships with. It's going to go after China. It's going to go after Saudi Arabia. It's going to go after countries like that on human rights issues. But with India, we know the story about the U.S.-India relationship, and perhaps you may have some more messaging in private, indirect settings from the U.S. in which there's, encouragement, polite pressure for India to tone back on its act in Kashmir. But even that, I think, is unlikely. The best that you could perhaps expect is if there were to be, speeches by Biden or other senior officials, there could be some gentle, subtle focus on how India and the United States can work together as largest and oldest democracies to promote democracy better at home or something like that. When Barack Obama was president, he made a speech in New Delhi in which he very gently called out India for its religious freedom issues. I think that's the type of thing that we could expect at the very most, because at the end of the day, I really don't see things changing. There had been, Biden, Kamala Harris, on the campaign trail had been critical of what was going on in Kashmir, but I think you need to look at that from a U.S. domestic political lens. I think they were trying to secure the votes of some Muslim American communities. That's the proper context for those comments that they did make that were critical of what India was doing in Kashmir.
Right. Now, Michael, the economy is a bigger factor in Pakistan now. The biggest challenge Pakistan is facing. Where could U.S. or the Biden administration help on that front? Because this is where Pakistan needs help at this point.
Yeah, and here I think there's a very significant disconnect brewing in the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. Moeed Yusuf and other Pakistani officials have said repeatedly that they want the U.S. to look at Pakistan through an economic lens. They want Biden to look at Pakistan through an economic lens, not an Afghanistan lens or any other lens, because Pakistan can be an economic partner. But I'm not sure that's what the Biden administration is going to want to do. As I had said earlier, the key focus areas for this new administration will be what Pakistan can do to help with the Afghan peace process and what Pakistan should do to deal with these terror groups that continue to be present on their soil. I don't think that you're going to have, at least initially, you're going to have a situation where the Biden administration is ready to start talking about, a new strategic dialogue that talks about economic cooperation and that type of thing. Yes, there has been pretty robust bilateral trade over the last few years. The two countries broke a record for bilateral trade volume in 2018, but there's a disconnect because I think Pakistan wants the security stuff to be pushed to the side in their relationship, whereas with the Biden administration, the security stuff remains front and center. And I think that all that one could hope for, perhaps in Pakistan, is that if Pakistan is perceived to be helpful in moving the peace process along in Afghanistan, and if Pakistan is perceived to have sufficiently cracked down on all of these terror groups in Pakistan that worry the United States and that worry India, only then might there be a receptivity in Washington and the Biden administration to broaden the relationship and to start focusing a lot more on the economic side. But final note, I do think there's a lot of potential for economic cooperations outside of government-to-government channels. The private sectors in both countries, I think there's a lot of potential there for there to be cooperation to boost investment and promote more economic cooperation between them.
Should Pakistan expect any type of carry-over type bill in upcoming days?
No, not at all. I'd say there's a zero chance of that. It's a very different. The geopolitics have changed. The U.S.-Pakistan relationship has changed. I don't think we should expect anything like that. Okay.
So, Dr. Misbah Azam, let me take it over to you now. I think President Biden have a lot to repair, but all the issues that the U.S. is now facing, I think there more focus will be internal and then focus on external. Now, in external, Pakistan fits in the puzzle somewhere. But there is definitely going to be divergence of interest. U.S. interest will be more on Afghanistan, needs Pakistan's help on Afghanistan. I don't know how much help could Pakistan provide, but there has always been this divergence of interest, and I think that may still continue.
Yeah, actually, I would like to have. I want to. I would answer your question, and I would like my friends Michael and Dr. Salim to comment on that. You know, the way I see it, that coming days with President Biden, the way I see it, and anybody can disagree with it. The way I see it is that President Biden has a lot of stuff to worry about domestically, like COVID-19, economy, and jobs, and all those kind of things. You know, now how it is going to be reflected on his international policy, we have yet to see. You know, Afghanistan is an issue there. Unlike President Trump, he likes to have some military over there for the peace dividend, you know, like so that, you know. So now, if the military is there inside Afghanistan, then what happens? Michael just mentioned, and there is another expert on Afghanistan. I am not in a liberty to take his name. He personally told me that he's not expecting very good thing coming out from the deals they are doing, and this was before President Biden took over. So if things will go wrong, things can go very wrong. You understand what I mean? That if things go wrong in Afghanistan, things can go very wrong for Pakistan in that sense, you know. So that's how I see it coming days, and we have yet to see. Now, Dr. Salim and Michael may see it a little differently. I would like to hear from them.
Yep. Dr. Salim, let's hear from you. And now there is also, you know, a new narrative in Pakistan that, oh, you know what, we are building CPEC with China. China is emerging as a superpower, so we need to focus more on China. If US doesn't help us and doesn't help us, that's fine. Let's focus on China. So that feeling is also there.
Let me add minor comment. Maybe you just saw Nikkei Asia's report where it says China and Pakistan fall out over the Belt and Road Framework. It just came in the recent days, you know, like in January. So of course there is a problem. So I don't think Pakistan should feel that way, you know, like, and I was hearing one of the expert, he was a ex-Air Force commander of Pakistan Air Force. He was saying that Pakistan must have American technology for their jets, you know, like F-16 and all that.
Right. No, I understand, but I think there is also a feeling among many diplomats within Pakistan that, oh, you know what, we tried, we've been more than 70 years now. China is emerging as a power, it's our neighbor, and also CPEC. Why not? Well, let's prioritize China over US.
Well, for us, to start with, we need to understand that foreign relations amongst major powers don't work the same way as if you are playing in your backyards with your friends and you tell them that I'm not your friend and I'm not going to play with you from tomorrow and I'll play with somebody else. There are a lot more dynamics involved that continue to kind of simmer somewhere here and there. So there is a very delicate balance that United States needs to kind of work in the region, because there is Pakistan, there is China, there is India, and they have strategic interests with all of them. So I don't agree with this presumption that we can leave one and completely lean on the other, because we have seen the repercussions of such policy previously. Also, I don't think that the military establishment in Pakistan wants to leave United States altogether. They have tried to gain leverage and maneuver, and through posturing with China, they have tried to gain further leverage from US. They have not indicated at any point that we are trying to cut off all relationship with United States. So that is one. And what was the second part of your question?
No, I think my question was more towards there is a feeling, there is a narrative in Pakistan. Now, obviously, that's a very minority narrative, and as you said, rightly so, that there is no way Pakistan or countries can, on one hand, you want to balance between Iran and Saudi, but the same way you have to balance between these two superpowers, and they are the powers. Obviously, China is Pakistan has been close to both, and has, I think, very well kept the relationship with balanced with both partners. The question really becomes is there is a level of priority that if US, on the one hand, the things have not been going well now, Pakistan but there has been divergence of interest. But with China, things have gone really well between China and Pakistan. There has not been divergence of interest.
Well, things have gone really well, quote unquote, but do we really know what's going on? Dr. Misbah just mentioned the Niki Asia report. There are voices emerging from within Pakistan that have questioned some of the agreements that have been inked. Right. All of it has been kept under strict secrecy, so nobody really knows what's going on. The powers that be, they keep promising an olive branch that is going to emerge from somewhere once everything is in place, and everything will be hunky-dory after that. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work. Right. We also have to understand why is China kind of dishing out these projects to Pakistan. They want to keep Pakistan as a proxy with an eye towards India. So are we happy doing that? Are we thinking about the concerns that Pakistani manufacturers have if we only become a service industry for the Chinese market? All these are questions that nobody in Pakistan is ready to acknowledge or answer. Because it then becomes a national security issue. So there is hope, but there is also some concern at some level.
Right. Now, let me take this question over to Michael. I think, Michael, so if you can just give your views on the balancing that Pakistan has been doing, and how will it continue? Now, the last question that I would pose at you is the more in depth on what the Saudi-US relationship will look like in Biden administration.
Yeah, so to your first question, I agree with what the other guests have said, that Pakistan is not going to leave the United States and fall into the China camp. Now, I know this has been the emphatic official position for a number of weeks, and particularly, in his comments to us at the Wilson Center last week, Moeed Yusuf had said that we don't do camp politics, and I think that's accurate. I think that's true. Pakistan, to me, really has no interest in letting go of the United States. It does derive a fair amount of advantages out of that relationship. One of them being, the hope or the expectation of receiving, high-level military technology that, at least to this point, China is not able to provide with the same value. Now, of course, security assistance to Pakistan has been suspended for a few years, so that's not an issue. But that's something that Pakistan would look to, and also, I really think that Islamabad continues to value its relationship with the U.S. because it continues to hope that the U.S. can use its leverage over India because of its relations with India to try to pressure India to change its policies in ways that would align more with what Pakistan wants. I think that's a misplaced hope, but I think that still is a hope and an expectation for the Pakistani government. Now, in terms of Saudi Arabia, I think that this is a relationship that's probably on a collision course. Well, maybe I wouldn't go that far, but it's a relationship that could suffer significantly. The U.S.-Saudi relationship. Even before Biden was inaugurated, you had seen some tweets from Jake Sullivan and some others very critical of Saudi Arabia and the human rights situation. The Khashoggi tragedy, that's something that I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of from the Biden administration on. And if there is any indication that the Biden administration will try to do what it can to improve its relationship with Iran, even if it's just signaling that, even if it doesn't actually do anything, but through public messaging indicates its intention to try to improve that relationship with Iran. Given how bad the Iran-Saudi relationship is right now, that would be a bad thing for U.S.-Saudi relations as well. So, I think that we could see some pretty troubling days ahead for that relationship. I'd sort of put it on the same level as the U.S. relationship with Russia. It sort of struggled in the Trump era. It wasn't in a good spot, but could get a lot worse. I think a lot of U.S. relationships with countries will improve, both with partners and rivals, but Saudi Arabia, I think we could see some tough days ahead.
Yeah, and then, Saudi Arabia and Israel's pressure on attacking Iran. I think chances of that have gotten minimal after Biden got elected.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting with Biden. I do think that this is not an administration that's going to want to encourage or do anything that could increase the likelihood of another war or an intensification of wars in the Middle East. I know that there's some detractors of the Biden administration that associate Biden with the Obama administration, which of course was involved in a number of wars, particularly scaling up the drone war in Pakistan, among other places. I think those days are past. I think that this administration, as was noted before, really wants to focus at home and try to bring more stability and prosperity at home. The last thing it wants to be burdened by is the risk of a fresh war or a fresh conflict, whether in the Middle East or anywhere else.
Faraz, I have one short question to Michael. Michael, President Trump made a lot of headways with U.S. relation with North Korea or with their leadership. How you see that is going to happen? Where that would stay?
Yeah, I think that's a category where this new administration will want to manage the relationship in a way that it doesn't get further out of control. And I think one way of doing that is to just ignore the North Koreans when they test a missile or when they engage in provocative language. I think that Trump took the bait. Well, of course, originally Trump wanted to talk with. At one point, he wanted to talk with the North Korean leadership, which he of course did with that very surreal summit. But then, he was responding to the bait coming from the North Koreans. I think that the Biden administration will obviously bring a much more sober approach to its foreign policy and its foreign relations. And for sure, it will want to work closely with its allies, with its treaty allies, including South Korea, that are obviously very threatened by North Korea. But I think that this administration, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, wanted to be cautious about provoking any country. It's going to be very careful. It's going to try to stay away from North Korea, not give it the attention that North Korea deserves, not necessarily respond when North Korea does something provocative, and hope that that'll be enough so that the administration can focus on other areas.
Do you see any war in Iran coming days?
In Iran? I certainly hope not. No, I think that this is a government that wants to stay away from that. It doesn't want to have more wars in the Middle East or anywhere else.
And if you look at the confirmation hearing of Tony Blinken, he said that they want to repeal the legislation that authorized the U.S. administration to start these wars after 9/11. So that's a clear indication that they want to consider that policy.
Okay. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to hear from you in future. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Appreciate.
ख़वातीन हज़रात, आपने माइकल कुगलमैन के हवाले से सुना, और ये बड़ी एक इंटरेस्टिंग मामलात हैं कि हमारी हमेशा से एक्सपेक्टेशन होती है कि जी अब कोई आ गया है, और मैं कमेंट्स में भी भाइयों के कमेंट्स पढ़ रहा हूँ कि अब वो पाकिस्तान के लिए कोई पैकेज होगा, तो सब में पहले कोई भी अगर सदर बनता है, मेरे नजदीक तो वो अपने मुल्क के लिए सदर बनता है, चाहे वो अमेरिका का सदर हो, चाहे वो रशिया का हो, चाहे वो चाइना का हो। और इस वक्त जो मामलात हैं, तो पहले तो उन्होंने अभी अपने अंदरूनी जो मामलात हैं, जो दाखिला मसाइल हैं, उसके ऊपर फोकस करना है। दाखिला मसाइल के अंदर जिस तरह आपको पता है कोविड-19 का एक मामला चल रहा है, मईशत का मामला चल रहा है, इकॉनमी जो है सफर कर रही है, जिस तरह दुनिया भर में जहाँ-जहाँ कोविड आया वहाँ इकॉनमी सफर कर रही है। तो वो सारे के सारे मामलात हैं जिनको सफरिंग हो रही है, जिनको बाइडेन साहब ने फिक्स करना है, क्योंकि बाइडेन साहब जिस तरह हमारे यहाँ ऑपोजिशन होती है, इसी तरह बाइडेन साहब के सामने भी ऑपोजिशन है, और वो जो ऑपोजिशन है आपको पता है वो डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प साहब है, वो हल्की-फुल्की ऑपोजिशन है नहीं। तो वो सब चीजें उनको अंदरूनी भी संभालनी है, और रिपेयर जो है, अच्छा इसमें तो कोई शक नहीं है कि रिपेयर तो करनी है, जो कि उनके मैनिफेस्टो में भी था, जो कि तकारीर में भी था कि बड़ी चीजों की रिपेयर होनी है। और हम जो है मेरे ख्याल से जितनी भी काफी डिस्टर्बेंस और जो हिलजुल हुई है पिछले 4 साल में, उसको जितना कोशिश करेंगे वो फिक्स करने की वो होगा। लेकिन पाकिस्तान के हवाले से मेरे हिसाब से कोई रेडिकल चेंज नहीं आ रहा। मैं डॉक्टर उवैस सलीम और डॉक्टर मिसबाह आज़म की तरफ जाता हूँ कि मैं बड़े सवालात देख रहा था, और उसमें पाकिस्तान के पैकेज वैकेज का मैंने सवाल भी कर लिया माइकल कूगल में। कभी ये अंदाजा था कि कोई पैकेज वैकेज तो मेरे ख्याल से नहीं मिलने वाला। तो अब जो करना है वो अपने ही कंधों पे और अपने ही बलबूते पे करना है। डॉक्टर उवैस सलीम।
जी, देखिए जैसे माइकल ने कहा कि अब हालात तब्दील हो गए हैं, दुनिया तब्दील हो गई है। परसों रात जब जो बाइडेन ने अपना इकोनॉमिक एजेंडा पहली दफा कौम के सामने रखा, उसमें वो मिनिमम वेज बढ़ाने की बात कर रहे हैं। उसी में उन्होंने ये जिक्र किया कि सिर्फ पिछले हफ्ते में 9 लाख नए लोगों ने अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट फाइल की है। कांग्रेस में अभी ये डिबेट हो रही है कि जो अगला स्टिमुलस पैकेज है, जो एक तरह से इमदादी पैकेज अमरीकी अवाम को दिया जाना चाहिए, वो दिया जाए या ना दिया जाए, और अगर दिया जाए तो वो कितना हो। तो ये अमेरिका के अंदर के जो इकोनॉमिक डायनामिक्स हैं और एक तरह से जो अफगान जंग है उसका भी ताल्लुक इसी से है, क्योंकि जो ये 18-20 साल की जंग है, इसमें अरबों डॉलर जो हैं वो ट्रिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स झोंके गए हैं, और उसका नतीजा कोई नहीं निकला। और एक तरह से अमेरिकन इकोनॉमी जो है वो उसका प्रेशर अब फील करना शुरू हो गई है। सो ये सारे वो मामलात हैं जिनकी वजह से फोकस जो है वो स्क्वेयरली इंटरनल रहेगा, और पैकेज वैकेज जो है पाकिस्तान छोड़ किसी भी मुल्क के लिए वो बहुत दूर की बात है। और एक तरह से मैं ये समझता हूं कि ये जो फोकस इंटरनल है ये जो बाइडेन के एडवांटेज में भी काम करेगा कि वो इन चीजों पर काम कर सकते हैं। अगर अमेरिका के अंदर सूरत हाल जो है वो बिल्कुल नॉर्मल होती तो फॉरेन पॉलिसी के हवाले से, अफगान जंग के हवाले से, इसराइल के हवाले से शायद उनकी हुकूमत से ज्यादा सवालात पूछे जाते। अब वो इन तमाम चीजों को फिल वक्त बैक बर्नर पर रख सकते हैं और इंटरनल एजेंडा पर फोकस कर सकते हैं।
डॉक्टर मिसबाह,
फराज, मैं आपसे एक सवाल करना चाह रहा हूँ इसी को डॉक्टर साहब की बात को आगे बढ़ाते हुए कि देखिए बिल्कुल सही फरमाया डॉक्टर साहब ने कि जो इंटरनल इश्यूज हैं वो उनकी बड़ी वैल्यू है, यहाँ पे जॉब्स है, इकोनॉमी है एंड ऑल दैट। लेकिन देखिए फराज के ये जो आईटी, मैं आपसे इसलिए ये सवाल पूछ रहा हूँ कि आप आईटी से आपका ताल्लुक है, कि जिस तरह से आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस और जिस तरह इसमें ग्रोथ आ रही है, तो ये तो एक क्या ये आने वाले दिनों में आप देख रहे हैं कि और जॉबलेसनेस होगी और भी लेबर फोर्स जो है वो घटानी पड़ेगी, इसकी वजह घटती जाएगी और ज्यादा आउटसोर्सिंग शुरू हो जाएगी?
देखें, शुक्रिया मिर्जा भाई। देखें आईटी में
आपकी इजाजत से इसमें शामिल कर दूं, पर मेरा आईटी से उतना ही ताल्लुक है जितना हमारा ग्रीक से है। तो
अच्छा,
मैं सिर्फ मेरा ख्याल ये है कि जहां एक तरफ कुछ जॉब्स जाएंगी तो शायद किसी नए एरिया में कुछ नई जॉब्स पैदा भी होंगी। सो अगर आप इसको भी अपने जवाब में ऐड
नहीं डॉक्टर साहब आप बिल्कुल सही फरमा रहे हैं, लेकिन मसला ये है ना कि वो जॉब्स तो वहां क्रिएट होंगी लेकिन फिर वो स्किल सेट जो है वो नहीं होगा। तो जॉबलेसनेस जहां जिस एरिया में होगी उस एरिया को किस तरह से कॉम्पनसेट करेंगे?
आप अपनी इंडस्ट्री को ज्यादा जानते हैं, so I would be interested कि
मैं इसमें मेरे ख्याल से एक शो हो जाए तो बड़ा अच्छा होगा। ये तो पूरा एक काफी ब्रॉड टॉपिक है और मैं तो सुबह शाम आई एम लिविंग थ्रू दिस। देखें सिलिकॉन वैली जो कि आपकी जो टेक्नोलॉजी का जो फोकस है और दुनिया में जो फोकस आता है उसको लीड कर रही होती है। इस बार सिलिकॉन वैली में सब में मेजर किन चीजों पे काम हो रहा है, उनमें 2-3 चीजों में बड़ा मेजर काम हो रहा है। एक आपकी ये क्लाउड और आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस, हर चीज क्लाउड में चली जाएगी। आपके जो लैपटॉप है इसमें आप कुछ भी नहीं होगा, हर चीज आप जो है जो कर रहे होंगे वो बेसिकली क्लाउड में होगी। तो अभी जैसे आप अपना सॉफ्टवेयर इस पे डाउनलोड किया हुआ था, माइक्रोसॉफ्ट वर्ड हो या कुछ भी हो, आपके डेस्कटॉप पे होता है, वो डेस्कटॉप पे नहीं होगा, वो क्लाउड में होगा। आपने उसको एक्सेस किया, इस्तेमाल किया, खत्म कर दिया, और उसके आप पेमेंट मेथड भी डिफरेंट हो रहे हैं, तो उस पर तो खैर अलग बात होगी। दूसरा जो सेक्टर जो सब में ज्यादा है वो है आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस। अच्छा, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस को हम देख रहे हैं, ये आपको नजर आ रही है। आपने बड़ी सारी चीजें देखी कि अक्सर आप जाएं कहीं पर कोई चीज सर्च करें तो उसके बाद आप फेसबुक खोलेंगे तो आपको उसी का ऐड आना शुरू हो जाएगा। फिर वो आपको हर चीज आपकी पिक करती है कि आपकी बिहेवियर कैसा है, उस हिसाब से ऐड होता है, और वो सारी की सारी चीजें। और जो सब में जो बड़ा सेक्टर है वो है ईवी सेक्टर, इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल का सेक्टर, जिसके ऊपर काम हो रहा है कि ये पूरी, अच्छा ये सबकी सब डिस्ट्रप्शन की तरफ जा रही है। पूरी की पूरी ऑटो इंडस्ट्री जो है, ये आपकी ट्रिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर की इंडस्ट्री जो कि डिस्टर्ब हो जाएगी। इसके अंदर दो चीजें हैं। अच्छा, वो एक जो जिसमें जो चीज है आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस है, ईवी सेक्टर, सिर्फ हम समझते हैं ईवी सेक्टर में सारी की सारी गाड़ियां जो है वो इलेक्ट्रिक की हो जाएंगी। ऐसा नहीं होगा, वो होंगी, वो तो एक एक पार्ट है उसका। उसकी चक्कर, अगला जो उसका चक्कर है कि ड्राइवरलेस हो जाएंगी गाड़ियां, ऑटोनमस ड्राइविंग हो जाएगी। आप गाड़ी में बैठेंगे, आपको लाइसेंस की जरूरत ही नहीं होगी। और ये हो रहा है, ऑटोनमस गाड़ियां तो अब आ चुकी हैं। टेस्ला जो है, जो कि मेरे घर जहां मैं रह रहा हूँ, मेरे घर से तकरीबन कोई आधे मील के ऊपर टेस्ला है, जहाँ टेस्ला जो स्टार्ट हुई है, उनका पूरा हेडक्वार्टर, जहाँ टेस्ला की न्यू प्रोडक्ट्स ही बनती हैं। तो वो पूरा की हैवी डिस्ट्रप्शन है। जब ये हैवी डिस्ट्रप्शन होगी, बहुत सारी जॉब जाएंगी। और उसके बाद जो एक और जो बहुत खतरनाक काम हो रहा है कि मैन्युफैक्चरिंग जो है वो रोबोटिक्स की तरफ जा रही है। और ये टेस्ला इस पे काम कर रहा है, यानी कि जो सब में ज्यादा जो जॉब हुआ करती है, मास जॉब जो होती हैं, वो होती हैं मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में हमेशा। और मैन्युफैक्चरिंग जब रोबोटिक्स की तरफ चली जाएगी तो ह्यूमन टच आपका खत्म हो जाएगा, ना होने के बराबर होगा आपका ह्यूमन टच। तो बहुत हैवी डिस्कशन होनी है। वो जो नियॉम सिटी सऊदी अरब बना रहा है, उसकी तरफ जो सऊदी अरब इसमें बहुत आगे, यानी कि बिन सलमान से आप बाकी जब मामला में क्रिटिसिज्म करें, लेकिन वो उन्होंने इस चीज के ऊपर उनकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग बड़ी अच्छी है। तो वो शिफ्ट उनको पता है, उनको ऑयल जो है वो भी ऑब्सोलेसेंस की तरफ चला जाएगा। उनको पता है कि सारे मामला हमारे खराब होंगे। तो वो ऑलरेडी जो है उनकी इन्वेस्टमेंट यहाँ की सिलिकॉन वैली की सारी जो टॉप कंपनीज हैं जो कि इस पूरी चेंज को लीड कर रही है, उनमें भी है उनकी। और साथ में वो सऊदी अरब में भी एडॉप्शन में सब में आगे जा रहे हैं, जो नियॉम सिटी का पूरा प्रोजेक्ट है। तो मिर्जा भाई, मेरे ख्याल से इसके ऊपर एक पूरा शो कर लें, मैं इसके ऊपर घंटे वाली बात, लेकिन ये मैंने छोटा सा आपको ग्लिम्स दे दिया, क्योंकि रजा भाई कह रहे हैं 2 से 3 मिनट में आप खत्म कर दें मामला।
अच्छा,
तो इन सारी की सारी चीजों का फॉरेन पॉलिसी के ऊपर, इन सब चीजों का बड़ा हैवी मामला होगा। क्योंकि अब जब हम अपनी लेबर ही नहीं एक्सपोर्ट कर सकेंगे, अगर हम अपनी लेबर जो है, जो हमारी मिडिल ईस्ट में जाती है, वो नहीं एक्सपोर्ट करें, तो फिर क्या होगा मामला। अच्छा, और मजे की बात ये, इसमें और मजे की बात ये कि चीन जो है वो अमेरिका से बिल्कुल बराबर बराबर चल रहा है, शाना बशाना चल रहा है इस पूरी की पूरी चेंज में। चीन पीछे नहीं है। यहाँ अगर टेस्ला है तो वहां पर नहीं है, और एक्सपेंग जैसी गाड़ियां वो इंट्रोड्यूस कर चुके हैं जो कि बिक रही हैं। और उनके जो सॉफ्टवेयर हैं, उनकी जो आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस है, उसमें वही अमेरिकन कंपनीज के चिप्स लगे हुए, तो वो उसमें इतनी ज्यादा आपस में एक दूसरे की कोलैबोरेशन इतनी हैवी है सिलिकॉन वैली की और चाइना की, कि वो दोनों एक दूसरे से इतने हैवीली जुड़े हुए हैं इस टेक्नोलॉजी की चेंज में कि अलग भी नहीं हो सकते।
ये एक बड़ी अहम बात है जो लोग इग्नोर कर जाते हैं जब वो ये कहते हैं कि चाइनीज इकोनॉमी अमेरिकन इकोनॉमी को ओवरटेक कर लेगी और उसके बाद अमेरिका बर्बाद हो जाएगा। इन दोनों मुल्कों की इकोनॉमी जो है वो इस तरह से टाइड अप है एक दूसरे के साथ कि ये इकट्ठे राइज करेंगे और इकट्ठे ही
मैं आपको उसकी बड़ी सबसे जो बड़ा जो है ईवी का डिस्ट्रप्शन है, उसमें दो कंपनीज है ना, टेस्ला है, न्यू है। टेस्ला ने अपनी फैक्ट्री अब चाइना में बना दी है। अब वो चाइना में उनकी फैक्ट्री बन रही है। अच्छा, उनके बहुत सारे जो कंपोनेंट्स है वो चाइना में बनते हैं। इसी तरह नियो जो कि चाइना की ईवी कंपनी को लीड कर रही है पूरी चेंज को, उसका जो चिप है, आर्टिफिशियल इंटेलिजेंस का जो चिप जो उसमें लगा हुआ है, वो है एनवीडिया का। एनवीडिया अमेरिकन कंपनी, सिलिकॉन वैली की कंपनी है। तो जुड़े हुए ना, मतलब वो इसके ऊपर बात होगी इंशाल्लाह मेरे ख्याल से। फिर मुझे कहा जा रहा है जी रैप अप, तो इस पे मैं आधे घंटे तो कम से कम खींच सकता हूँ, लेकिन इन सारी चीजों का पॉलिटिकल होगी,
बहुत बड़ा मौजू है।
हाँ,
बहुत बड़ा मौजूद, दैट्स करेक्ट।
बड़ी ठीक ठाक होगी, क्योंकि आपके इंटरेस्ट, आप जब ऑयल डिपेंडेंसी खत्म हो जाएगी तो अमेरिका के वो फिर ऑयल नहीं चाहिए, फिर अमेरिका की पॉलिसी मुख्तलिफ होगी। और मजे की बात ये कि हमें लगता है कि ईरान जो है वैसे बड़ा पीछे, लेकिन ईरान में पढ़े लिखे लोग बड़े पाए जाते हैं जो कि खुद इन चीजों में काम कर रहे हैं। तो मैं भी बड़ा हैरान हो जाता हूँ कि ईरान में भी इस तरह के काम हो रहे हैं, जो कि आपकी ईवी कार वगैरह के ऊपर, लेकिन अभी बहुत पीछे हैं, वो बहुत पीछे हैं। लेकिन चीजों में डिस्ट्रप्शन आ सकती है। जब इकोनॉमी डिस्टर्ब होगी, आपका फोकस इन्हिसार कहीं और होगा, तो फिर आपकी पॉलिसी जो पूरी जो पॉलिटिक्स है, आपकी फॉरेन पॉलिसी है, उसमें भी तब्दीली आएगी। तो हैविंग सेड दिस, मेरे ख्याल से खवातीन हज़रात, मैंने ये थोड़ी सी जो मेरी दूसरी साइड है, जो कि आईटी से ज्यादा वो प्रोडक्ट डेवलपमेंट है बेसिकली जो इस्तेमाल होती है, वो है, उस तरफ मेरा फोकस, जो वो उस पर फिर कभी इंशाल्लाह बात करेंगे इसके साथ ही। डॉक्टर मिसबा आजम, आपका बहुत शुक्रिया। डॉक्टर वैसली, आपका बहुत शुक्रिया। और ये बड़ी इंटरेस्टिंग डिस्कशन थी। और ये आखिरी का जो सवाल था, ये तो आपने मेरी कहते ना उस पे नर्व पे हाथ रख दिया। तो चलें ख़वातीन हज़रात, आप अगर आपने शो को शेयर नहीं किया तो प्लीज शेयर कीजिए, अपनी आरा से हमें आगाह करते रहिए और इंशाल्लाह नए टॉपिक्स के साथ हम जो है हाजिर होते रहेंगे आपकी खिदमत में। बहुत शुक्रिया देखने का। फराज दरवेश को मिसबाह
बस एक छोटा सा कमेंट था विवेक साहब का आपके लिए फराज, आप अगर उसका जवाब दे दें। उन्होंने ये कहा कि आपने शायद तारीख कश्मीर की नहीं पढ़ी और आपने जो है वो नहीं पढ़ा जो रेजोल्यूशन था, वरना आप ये बातें ना करते, कश्मीर की बात ना करते। तो उसका जरा जवाब दे दें आप।
कश्मीर की जो रेजोल्यूशन भी मैंने पढ़ा है, तो कौन सी मैंने कश्मीर की ऐसी बात की जो कि उनको अच्छी लगी? कश्मीर डिस्प्यूटेड टेरिटरी है, वो तो इंडिया भी उसको एक्सेप्ट करता रहा है अब से 2-3 साल पहले तक।
हाँ, और हमारे कुछ इंडियन
वेरी फैक्ट कि आपने कश्मीर की बात की, बस उनको यही अच्छी नहीं लगी।
या हमारे इंडियन कुछ दोस्त हैं, वो बलूचिस्तान जो कि पाकिस्तान का पार्ट है, उसकी तो बात बड़े जोर शोर से करते हैं कि उसे छोड़ देना चाहिए, वहां बड़ा जुल्म हो रहा है, लेकिन कश्मीर पे बात नहीं होती।
लेकिन उसमें भी है, बलूचिस्तान तो यूएन में रिकॉग्नाइज डिस्प्यूटेड टेरिटरी कभी रही नहीं है ना।
That's true, वो
बात है कि भाई
वो तो पाकिस्तान का पार्ट है,
लेकिन रही नहीं। कश्मीर तो डिस्प्यूटेड टेरिटरी रही है, उसमें तो इंडिया ने खुद उसको जो है
और वो है
अब आपने उसको चेंज कर लिया। लेकिन अब यानी कि मोदी साहब की हुकूमत ने चेंज किया है, उससे पहले तो नहीं थी। तो वो तो एक इंडियन रिकॉग्नाइज्ड डिस्प्यूटेड टेरिटरी है, वो तो अपनी हुकूमत से कंप्लेन करें, जाके नेहरू साहब को पकड़े। फराज दरवेश गरीब को क्या, आप जाके नेहरू से शिकायत करें। तो ख़वातीन हज़रात, ऑन ए लाइटर नोट, इसके साथ ही हम लोगों को इजाजत दीजिए। हमें तनकीद जो है हम उसको वेलकम करते हैं। आपको जो भी तनकीद है, चाहे हमारे हिंदुस्तानी दोस्त हो चाहे पाकिस्तानी हो, तो हम उसको वेलकम करते हैं। हमें अपनी आरा से अपनी तनकीद से भी आगाह करते रहिए। इजाजत दीजिए, खुदा हाफिज। चलें जी, एंड